Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wild Rivers Film Radio, the official podcast of the Wild Rivers Film Festival, broadcasting on KCIW 100.7 FM. I'm Sue Wright.
And I'm Bev Juday. Thanks so much for joining us.
Today we're joined by director Mark Shapiro and Dave Crete, a subject of the short documentary Invisible Enemy, a powerful and timely film that explores a threat many people don't see, but that deeply impacts individuals, families, and communities.
Invisible Enemy will be screening during the upcoming Wild Rivers Film Festival program, during the Brookings' second Saturday Art Walk on April the 11th at Compass Rose Cafe from 3 to 6 p.m. We're honored to have both Mark and Dave with us to talk about the story behind the film and the filmmaking process.
But before we dive in, we'd like to thank the Wild Rivers Film Festival's 2025 presenting sponsor, the Tolowadeni Nation, whose generous support makes both our festival and our summer workshop possible.
We'd also like to thank the City of Brookings, Curry County Cultural Coalition, and Oregon Film. To learn more about supporting independent film on the Wild Rivers Coast, you can visit us at thewildriversfilmfestival.com.
If you're new to the show, welcome. The Wild Rivers Film Festival is a 4-day celebration of independent, regional, and international cinema held each August in Brookings, Oregon. We screen dozens of films across multiple venues, along with filmmaker Q&As, panels, and special events that connect our audiences directly with the artists behind the work.
This year's festival is going to run from August 13 to 16, and passes are on sale right now.
Mark and Dave, welcome to the Wild Rivers Film Radio. It's wonderful to have you both here.
Thank you very much for having us.
To start off, could each of you introduce yourselves and share a bit about your backgrounds in filmmaking?
Sure, I'll start. My name is Mark Shapiro, and I live in Portland, and I'm the co-director of Invisible Enemy, the short film. We're going to obviously learn a lot more about this film, but when we made, my co-directing partner and I, Douglas Brian Miller, when we made a film called Downwind. Downwind is a film about nuclear weapons testing in the state of Nevada and the impact of radioactive detonations that impacted, thousands and thousands of people in the communities and the environment. That film was narrated by Martin Sheen and features Michael Douglas and others. So when we premiered our film in Las Vegas, I met Dave Crete, who you'll meet here in a second. And Dave was in the Air Force and was stationed uprange in Nevada. And we learned his story, which he'll tell you about more, which details a group of honorable men and women who served and are not covered for their any insurance because they served in a classified capacity. And so they can't get coverage for a lot of ailments known to be possible from exposure to radiation and other chemicals. And so we felt like it was important to tell the story and to right this wrong. And Dave Crete is an incredibly inspirational individual. And we have followed him now for over 2 years, 2.5 years shooting him around Nevada and actually around the country, so he could tell his story, his truth.
Dave, can we hear just a bit about your involvement?
Yeah, so thank you for doing this. So I'm an Air Force veteran. I served in the Air Force from 1983 to 1989. And for 4 of those years, they served in an area called the Nevada Test and Training Range. And it's an area north of Las Vegas where the nuclear bombs were tested from the 1950s, 1951 to 1992. So during that time, I served out there, and what myself and the the guys that I served with found out was that the entire area that we worked in was contaminated. The government knew it was contaminated, but decided it was the best place to do what they wanted to do. And about 10, 12 years ago, we started to find out what it was that we were exposed to, because we started asking questions on why so many of us were sick, why our wives had so many health problems, why our kids were born with birth defects. And because of social media and things like that, we started to find one another. And what we found out was that our kids were all had birth defects, that we were all sick, and that many of the guys that we served with had already passed away. And so I started researching why that was, and we found out it was due to exposures that we experienced while on the range.
And this is a hidden story, isn't it?
Yeah, we're a group that people really don't know about. They don't know where we work. They don't understand what we did, and the government denies we exist.
Wow.
And it's really kind of unique.
It sounds like it. So for our listeners who haven't seen Invisible Enemy, you've talked a little bit, you've sort of alluded to it, but how would you describe the film? I know it's a documentary.
Yes, it's a 13-minute documentary film. And we went and spoke with Dave and a number of people that he served with on the range to tell their story, to tell their truth in black and white about what's happened to them, what they're up against, and the inspirational story about an organization called the Invisible Enemy that's helping, again, to right this wrong, to get legislation passed to protect these honorable people. They served honorably and need to be taken care of. And I know that I believe Dave even has an individual that he knows who lives in Brookings, and there are people all over the country that are impacted by this. And Dave has been going around the country. In fact, today he's in Florida on behalf of his organization, again, to right this wrong. So the film, we speak with a lot of airmen who served. We sort of expose the issue. We talk about what it is and what needs to get done and what people can do to help protect veterans who protected us.
We love showing films that bring stories to light. And I believe we screened Downwind a year ago in our 2024 festival. So I'm really excited to explore this story more. But since it's a kind of a hidden story, I'm wondering what were some of the biggest challenges in bringing this subject to the screen.
I guess I'll start and then Dave can pipe in, because he's obviously been the one who's interviewed, and the other airmen that he worked with were interviewed. I think for me, the biggest challenge is it's an incredibly sensitive subject matter to hear stories about people who were impacted by what Dave had talked about, the chemicals and the detonations. That I don't know if people are aware, but there were over 1,000 nuclear detonations at the Nevada test site, which is a large swath of land. And Dave and others were there, working daily, drinking the water, eating food. They were living uprange, and again, they were doing something. They did a really important thing by ending the Cold War, and again, protecting us. And it's incumbent upon us as Americans, whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, Libertarian, to protect the people that protect you. And that's what was challenging for me, was hearing the stories and being sensitive to the topic itself, because you hear these stories of illnesses and families that are affecting the airmen as well as their wives and children and generations. So it's a very sensitive subject matter, as well as the personal journeys of every one of the people that we interviewed. And these are all incredibly honorable people. Every single one of them, we asked the question, would you serve again? They said yes, they would. They are honorable, people in America that we need to respect and tell their story and tell it proudly. In that way, there were times that again, you're dealing with people that are replacing medications in front of your eyes and that have scars and that have tumors, visible tumors. Those are things that it's you want people to understand what they're going through, but it's hard sometimes to ask those questions. And I know Dave can probably answer this as well.
So I know that in general, when you're doing documentaries, it requires building deep trust between filmmakers and participants. But with this particular topic, I would imagine that it was harder in some ways and more vital to the whole film. How did you go about building that kind and depth of trust?
Well, it was interesting for me. Dave has become a dear friend and someone that when I'm in town, when we're shooting him, he and his wife Eileen, they make us dinner. We sit down with them. We meet their kids. We're involved in parties and events, and they've made us feel like family. And I think the trust goes both ways. He's telling us his truth, and it's our job to get that story out there as filmmakers. I've developed a trust with Dave, and it's sometimes there are things Dave cannot talk about because I mentioned that they're honorable. There are every one of the men, including Dave, they can only go to a certain point before they're not allowed to. Their information that they share is a lot of it. They can't share any classified information. They'll get right to the brink of that, but then they won't cross that line. And it's something I needed to respect. And for the most part, I may ask Dave a question, and then Dave may push back, but I respect that boundary that we have in our relationship.
I can only imagine what that exchange feels like and sounds like. Were there times when you started off, you probably had some ideas or thought you understood the issue? Were there times during filming that you changed your mind or your understanding?
I think that's part of a great documentary film, that you start off with an idea of what you're going to shoot, and then as you lean into the story and get deeper and learn more about the subject matter, it inspires deeper conversation. And so that was certainly something that happened with us, where we learned more and more. And part of it is that we're dealing with a very unique individual. Dave Crete, who you have on the line here, was called out and complimented by members of Congress. We were in DC last week, and every one of them, to a person, said that Dave is doing something that no one has done before. And we're ranging on the point of American hero, and that, and we have an idea of what the story will go to, but we're starting to see it kind of develop and crystallize further as the story develops and takes shape. And again, that's all reliant upon the truth of the story and the trust you have between filmmaker and subject.
And how did you decide whose voices to center in the film?
There's only one voice to center, and it's Dave Crete, because he's the only one he's heading up this cause. And there are others that we interviewed on other airmen and individuals that we talked to around. But Dave is the one who started the organization, and I think it would be great to hear more about how that came to be in 2023. We're still in the infancy of this organization, and Dave can tell you more about it. But Dave is the one who's compiling the list of names of his fallen comrades and others, and this list keeps growing, and it's something that we need to, as a American community, step forward and support these guys. And so it was clear who the go-to person was for this topic. And in the same way with Downwind, when we talked with Martin Sheen and Michael Douglas and others, and Ian Zabarte, the principal man of the Western Bands of the Shoshone Nation, we wanted to make sure we were talking to the right people. And in this case, we are speaking with the right people, because they're the ones on the front lines of this.
So I want to commend Dave for his courage to take this action on, And I really want to hear more about the I want our audience to hear more about the organization. We have a large veterans community here in Brookings, and I think they will be really interested to hear Dave's story. So just maybe a shortened version for our audience on the podcast today. So Dave, can you give us a nutshell version?
So in about 2014, on Facebook, one of the guys that I served with sent me a note and asked me if this was Cujo. And that was, Cujo is a movie from way back, and it became my nickname. And so I replied back and I said, yes, that's me. And I knew who it was. It was the guy that was in my wife and I's wedding. And long story short was we planned a reunion because we had all started to find one another through Facebook. We planned a reunion in Las Vegas. We got together, it was like spring of 2015. And at that reunion, we started talking. And the odd thing is one of the guys asked a question if anybody had tumors. And what an odd question for a group of guys who haven't seen one another in, 25, 30 years. So when we were there, we started talking about it, and many of us did. And it was an alarming number of people that had tumors. And that conversation led to our kids have issues like that. Our wives have had issues. And then it got into how some of the guys that we served with had already died, and how some of the guys that we served with were really sick. So I started researching because I wanted to figure out the why. We understood the nexus. We all worked in the same area. But why? What was it about this area that made us all seem to have real significant health issues? And then I started doing the research. And I did the research for years and years before I started talking to anybody. And I found out the reasons why. And I found out that not only did I understand why now, I found the documents that said the government knew what was going to happen to us, but they decided and put it in writing that the juice was worth the squeeze. They said that the benefit to national security outweighs the future environmental liability. Therefore, it's worth having people work out in the areas that we did. And I decided that, I'd been involved in politics for a long time. And I decided, one, I understood how politics works. And number two, that they don't have that right to make that kind of a decision that makes not only those of us that serve sick, but our family members sick. You don't just get to decide that people that aren't even born yet are going to be ill because of something that their parent did.
And when you sign up to serve, you have a certain knowledge of risk, and you're willing to take those risks. But to have risk hidden from you, especially risks that involve your family, that's a different thing, isn't it?
It is. And a lot of us struggle with the fact that like all four of my children were born with significant issues. One of them had his issues fixed surgically as a birth defect. The other three will never be free of the problems that they have because of my service in the military. And these are life-altering problems. It's not like they got a rare form of chicken pox. It's like they have life-altering problems that will be with them forever.
And that are probably expensive to support.
Yeah, expensive to support and debilitating.
Yes.
And it's not, obviously it's not their fault. And the government denies any responsibility. And I said that's garbage, and that's not okay. And they do it to this day.
I can only imagine the challenges that you're facing. And so in telling this story and bringing it to the rest of the world to see, how did you balance emotional storytelling with factual and investigative elements?
You don't get away from the emotion.
Mm-hmm.
That's always there. And my kids will tell you, I'm a super emotional guy anyway. this makes it worse. But the factual storytelling is just that. And I have to be careful. And those of us that talk about what we did, we have to be careful because we can't tell the secrets. We signed a document that said we won't do it. We took an oath that said we won't do it. And we honor that. But it's really not about what we did. It's about where we did it. It's about the testing that took place. It's been a bombing range since World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a missile testing and rocket testing and bomb dropping and everything you could imagine that the military does has happened there for decades. Then you throw in, roughly 1,000 nuclear tests that took place there. And it's all contaminated. I've read in things and I've had physicists look at it and they say it's the most contaminated place on Earth. It's worse than Chernobyl.
And there's still servicemen there, right?
Yeah, and the air that we breathed was contaminated. The soil that, the ground, literally that, I was an Air Force cop and we'd go out and do maneuvers and stuff and crawl around in the dirt and go out to the firing range and be covered in it. It was all contaminated. And then the food the water our food was cooked in, that we showered in, that we drank, was all contaminated. And the government's response was, well, you don't get sick from drinking radioactive water. And I found out that they're not necessarily wrong, but plutonium, which is what's in most of these bombs, is the third most toxic heavy metal, which is a whole different set of problems.
So do you see this film as a call to action? And if so, which I imagine you do, what do you hope viewers feel inspired to do after they watch this?
Well, the first thing that I wanted to do, my original motivation was I'm a guy who sits on Facebook and starts watching reels, and I sit there and I watch these videos I can watch them for a couple of hours. And I realized how educational these videos were. And so my purpose was to create something that would educate people about who we are and what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the real purpose of it. And my hope is it pisses them off.
Yeah.
That people see what the government has actually been capable of doing by intentionally making people sick, knowing it's going to cause birth defects, knowing that the wives of those who serve there, because it's mostly men, are going to have miscarriages, and those women that do serve there end up having fertility problems and may not even be able to have kids.
And what it just triggers in my mind, thinking how many other places exist just like this. And we don't know it yet.
One thing I can say that I believe is true is thankfully there's not a lot of places like this. There's nowhere else in the world that this many nuclear tests have taken place. Literally nowhere else in the world. There are places that are contaminated from nuclear testing, like out in the Solomon Islands and things out in the Pacific. And the folks that live there have been devastated. But as far as everything that's associated with where we work, there's nowhere else like this. But the nuclear testing all by itself, what it's done to people is horrible. And there are other places. And the government has seen fit to do things to benefit those that live downwind of the test. They've done things to benefit those that work for the Department of Energy who are sick as a result of working in these areas. But the Department of Defense, they specifically excluded and won't help and won't admit to the problem and make it very, very difficult for us as veterans to get our benefit.
Mm-hmm. So, Mark, Dave, is the film being used in educational or community settings to generate actions to try to address the issue or the outcomes for veterans?
In terms of, Dave can answer part of this, but the film has screened at festivals around the country. It actually has a screening coming up in North Dakota next month. And has been all over the country, and Dave has been traveling to a lot of the festivals and educating people, and some of these great film festivals, like Oscar qualifying places like Woodstock Film Festival, where he had the individuals there just very really excited about the story and for people to take action. And so that's been a really exciting part of this. Dave's articles about the invisible enemy are all over the internet. He has an incredible team of publicists who have there have been thousands and thousands of stories seen by millions of eyeballs about what's going on. So yeah, we hope there is action that will take place soon.
Okay. We are going to need to wrap up our podcast here, but we're screening Invisible Enemy in April, and we hope that one or both of you can join us for a question and answer period at 4 o'clock during that April 11th screening. I know our audience will have lots of questions. So that's it for this episode of Wild Rivers Film Festival. Many thanks to Dave Shapiro and Dave Crete for joining us. To learn more about the festival, to buy passes, volunteer, or explore sponsorship opportunities, visit wildriversfilmfestival.com.
You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
Our recordings are by Michael Gorse. Our sound mixing and editing is Tom Bozak. I'm your producer, Sue Wright. Our guests today were Mark Shapiro and Dave Crete, and host are Juday and myself. Thanks for listening.
And we'll see you at the movies.